I think 100% he could take Dricus down. Can he keep him down? I think he can keep him down, but
really,
come on. I don't know if he can get the finish because Dricus is very, very tough. There's a reason Dricus is the champ. He's very tough, and Dricus will not stop trying.
Dricus du Plessis jest bliski znokautowania Roberto Sodicza!
Khamzat, you think you're strong, you think you're powerful, you have not felt anything. And I can't wait till I see it on his face because I see it on every single person I fight's face.
DDP Khamzat, I always bet against DDP. I'm like, yeah, he's going to lose this one. And he always wins, so I'm not doing it anymore.
To be on your back against Chimaev is a nightmare for anyone in that division. And that's the thing. It's like whether he decides to stay on the feet or decides to grapple you, he's exciting to watch. He's nonstop trying to destroy you. And I don't know a whole lot of people that can crush someone's teeth or jaw with a rear naked choke. It's like, oh, well, he's trying to choke you. Just protect your chin.
Everybody, I'm coming for everybody. Kill everybody. I'm the champ. I'm the king. I'm most dangerous guy there. I got coming for everyone. I kill everybody. Allah Akbar.
Dricus du Plessis enters UFC 319 as champion, but he's never faced a threat like Khamzat Chimaev.
Over to his corner. Oh, he went full march.
Chimaev's wrestling is relentless. He averages over 7 takedowns per 15 minutes, 17 seconds. Yet the South African Storm has built his career on defying expectations and breaking opponents in ways few can predict.
He's got Whitaker and all kinds of trouble.
World in trouble.
Oh my goodness.
Big strikes raining down by the South African.
We'll compare Chimaev's dominance over grapplers like Burns and Holland to du Plessis' ability to pressure and disrupt technical strikers. Think of those looping hooks that shattered Whitaker's nose. This breakdown reveals how du Plessis' odd striking angles could be the key to shutting down Chimaev's power, setting the stage for a title defense that few thought possible.
As a fan of the sport and as the middleweight champion of the world, that's a fight that gets me more excited. Taking somebody's oath, I've beaten Strickland before, and I know I'll beat him again. So getting that Khamzat fight, that gets me excited. I think the whole world, the fans wants to see it. So the fight the world thinks is the best next fight, that's what I want. So yeah, I think the Khamzat fight is 100% what I want. The UFC is going to do what they're going to do. But from a fan perspective and from a fighter's perspective, I think Khamzat should get the next shot.
What he did to Whitaker was just, nobody thought that was going to happen. That was crazy.
That was scary.
He does it to everybody. Everybody he gets a hold of, he just ragdolls. And Robert Whitaker, seeing him breaking Robert Whitaker's jaw just by squeezing him across his face.
Do you think it's different with du Plessis? Because he can wrestle.
He can wrestle. He's got very good jiu-jitsu. He hits fucking hard, and he's a big, durable dude. But I don't know if he's going to be able to wrestle with that guy. I don't know, man. The Khamzat's skill is so high level, it makes me wonder. It's some guys, like you see it in jiu-jitsu. There's some guys that look really good until they fight somebody who's really, really good. And then they get manhandled.
Dricus du Plessis' journey to the UFC middleweight title started far from the spotlight. He built his foundation in South Africa and Poland, capturing 2 EFC belts and KSW gold and finishing 14 opponents in just over 3 years, a pace that set him apart among regional prospects. These early years revealed a relentless competitor, but few predicted he would transform into a champion on the sport's biggest stage. Once du Plessis signed with the UFC in 2020, his approach shifted. He stopped relying on takedowns as his primary weapon and immediately showcased a looping overhand right that stunned Marcus Perez in his debut. This marked a clear break from his previous style. He began to develop a striking game defined by awkward footwork and unpredictable angles. Against Sean Strickland, he walked through jabs that would normally keep most fighters at bay. When facing Robert Whitaker, he mixed in spinning attacks from defensive positions, forcing even seasoned opponents to second-guess their reads. What sets du Plessis apart is not just his unpredictability, but his ability to keep up the pressure deep into fights. He maintains a pace that breaks opponents down, as seen in his rematch with Strickland, where he outstruck the former champion 124-64. His conditioning is the product of high-altitude runs and resistance training in South Africa's heat, giving him the stamina to keep output high when others start to fade. His evolution is clear. He went from a submission-first prospect to a striker who bulldozes with 6-inch hooks and then uses wrestling if needed. This flexibility makes him difficult to prepare for, as Whitaker discovered when expecting a wild brawler, but meeting a composed technician instead. Unlike champions who rely on one-punch knockouts or pure technique, du Plessis wins through persistent pressure. He doesn't need to end fights with a single shot. He breaks opponents over time, both physically and mentally, until resistance fades. Khamzat Chimaev's emergence in the UFC was sudden and impactful. His debut in July 2020 came on Fight Island in Abu Dhabi, a time when most sports were paused and the UFC needed new faces to fill its cards. Chimaev seized the moment, first overwhelming John Phillips with a staggering 124-2 strike edge, then returning just 10 days later to finish his next opponent without absorbing a single significant strike. In less than 2 weeks, he became one of the most talked-about newcomers, his dominance impossible to ignore. What distinguishes Chimaev from other wrestling-based prospects is the way he blends aggression with finishing instinct. Against Gilbert Burns, he showed he's not limited to positional control. He was willing to abandon pure wrestling to trade heavy shots, outstriking a former title challenger in a wild opening round. His performance against Kevin Holland highlighted his grappling variety. He chained single-leg takedowns into body locks, elevated Holland for slams, and maintained top pressure that left little room to breathe. The approach is reminiscent of prime Khabib Nurmagomedov's suffocating style, but Chimaev brings more unpredictability in his takedown entries and transitions. Moving to middleweight addressed two major issues for Chimaev. The brutal cut to 170 pounds led to repeated cancellations, including a high-profile bout with Nate Diaz, and his natural size, walking around at over 200 pounds, fits the division better. Training footage shows him sparring with larger partners, focusing on explosive power and speed to ensure his wrestling translates against bigger opposition. His team emphasizes maintaining agility while adding strength, aiming to preserve his early round explosiveness. Chimaev's aggression is relentless. He regularly chains takedowns at a rate nearly double the division average, and once on top, he lands over 4 significant strikes per minute, rare efficiency for a wrestler. Opponents describe the experience as suffocating, with Chimaev blending strikes and grappling in a way that rarely gives them a moment to reset. Yet his meteoric rise has slowed. He's managed just 6 UFC bouts over 4 years, including only 1 fight last year. In contrast, du Plessis has faced 5 top 10 opponents during the same stretch, gaining experience Chimaev lacks. This difference in activity could matter in a title fight where championship rounds test both skill and endurance. Chimaev's psychological tactics add another layer. He's known for intense stare-downs like the one that silenced Kevin Holland before their fight, and for projecting confidence in interviews, often planting seeds of doubt in opponents' minds. These mind games have rattled experienced fighters before a punch is even thrown, giving Chimaev an edge before the cage door closes. This matchup brings together two fighters whose styles reflect opposite philosophies. Du Plessis storms forward with looping bombs, constantly shifting stances and throwing from odd angles, while Chimaev methodically sets up entries for double-leg slams and body locks. Where du Plessis thrives on chaos, mixing pressure, awkward footwork, and volume, Chimaev relies on disciplined control, using his wrestling to dictate where the fight takes place and how quickly it ends. Chimaev's early explosiveness is a major threat, but it comes with questions. Against Gilbert Burns, his output fell by roughly a fifth after the first round, exposing the risk that his pace can drop if an opponent survives the initial surge. Du Plessis, in contrast, is built for attrition. He averages over 120 significant strikes landed in 3-round fights and maintains that output deep into later rounds. We saw him training at 6,000 feet in South Africa, mask on, drilling sprawl and pivot for Chimaev's shots, preparing specifically for the kind of pressure few can match in championship rounds. Size and strength, often decisive in wrestling-heavy matchups, don't faze Chimaev. He's shown the ability to control and finish larger opponents, using leverage and positioning more than brute force. At middleweight, he's no longer depleted by weight cuts and seems even more dangerous. For du Plessis, who often bullies smaller foes in the clinch, this means his usual physical advantages may be neutralized. Looking at history, pressure fighting sometimes unravels elite wrestlers. Du Plessis outstruck Israel Adesanya, a fighter who's neutralized wrestle strikers before, by mixing unpredictable movement with relentless output. This precedent suggests that chaos, when applied with timing and variety, can disrupt even the most disciplined game plans. Expert opinions remain split. Some believe Chimaev's wrestling will overwhelm, pointing to his control against Kevin Holland. Others think du Plessis' messy, high-pressure style could force mistakes and take over late. The real question is whether Chimaev can maintain his approach if the fight moves into unfamiliar territory against a champion who's proven he can thrive there. Momentum for UFC 319 began building the night du Plessis defeated Israel Adesanya. That win, which left Adesanya's nose broken in multiple places, silenced doubts about du Plessis' legitimacy as champion and gave him the confidence to take on a new kind of challenge. Since then, his training has zeroed in on defensive wrestling, with his team bringing in Olympic-level partners to simulate Chimaev's explosive entries. The focus remains on maintaining the pressure-heavy game that overwhelmed previous opponents, but with added layers of takedown awareness. Chimaev's route to this title shot followed a different pattern. After repeated struggles making the welterweight limit, he shifted his focus to middleweight, allowing him to prepare without the strain of drastic weight cuts. Instead of a ranked middleweight trial, he's run full sparring camps at the new division, working with larger partners to ensure his wrestling translates. Training footage shows Chimaev drilling cage cutting and takedown chains, with his coaches emphasizing energy conservation for the later rounds, a departure from his usual early blitz. Inside their camps, the preparation is detailed. Du Plessis spars with taller partners to mimic Chimaev's reach and focuses on defending chain takedowns. His team relies on a high-protein diet to support the sustained pace needed for 300 strike outputs. Chimaev's camp brings in unorthodox strikers to prepare for du Plessis' angles. Chimaev's takedown entries are built on sudden level changes, often disguised behind his striking. Against Meerschaert, he faked a jab before shooting in and finishing the fight in just 17 seconds, showing how quickly he can close the distance. For du Plessis, the answer lies in movement. He used lateral footwork and constant circling to frustrate Adesanya, denying clean entry points for takedowns. Training clips show du Plessis drilling sprawl and pivot sequences, especially to counter body lock attempts. The challenge will be to avoid the collar ties Chimaev uses to transition from striking into grappling, a tactic Whitaker managed to disrupt in their later rounds. Where the fight takes place matters. Chimaev's best work happens when he corrals opponents along the fence, chaining takedowns and working for top position. Du Plessis, on the other hand, needs open space to set up his unorthodox attacks. Significantly, du Plessis has repeatedly outlanded his opponents in round 3 by over 40 strikes, a testament to his ability to ramp up the pace as others slow down. If Chimaev can cut off the cage early, he'll limit du Plessis' movement and force more grappling exchanges. On the ground, Chimaev's threat is immediate. Once on top, he pummels at a rate of over 7 ground strikes per minute, making every takedown attempt dangerous. Du Plessis' takedown defense sits at 22%. A concern against Chimaev's 57% success rate. His team has added submission specialists to address threats like the anaconda and rear naked choke, knowing one mistake could end the fight. Footwork and feints will shape the stand-up. Du Plessis' constant movement draws reactions and sets up his strangest strikes, spinning elbows, jumping knees, and wide hooks. Chimaev's forward pressure and limited head movement could leave him open, especially if he walks into something unexpected. At the same time, these risky moves could create openings for Chimaev to counter and shoot. Chimaev's ability to adapt mid-fight remains a wild card. He shifted to pure wrestling when hurt against Burns, showing he can change tactics if forced. His camp claims new defensive layers have been added for this matchup, anticipating du Plessis' chaos. Most analysts see 2 likely outcomes. Chimaev dominates early with takedowns and finishes by submission, or du Plessis weathers the storm and takes over as Chimaev's output fades. The first round's wrestling exchanges and du Plessis' energy in the third will be critical. With only 2 of their combined 31 fights ever going the distance, a finish is likely. Which style will bend further under pressure? Only UFC 319 will decide. Legacy and future implications hang in the balance for both fighters as the middleweight division stands at a crossroads. For Dricus du Plessis, a win over Khamzat Chimaev would solidify his place as a dominant champion, adding an unbeaten phenom to a resume that already features title defenses against 2 former champions in Adesanya and Whitaker. Such a victory would not only validate his unpredictable style at the highest level, but also raise his profile within the UFC and the broader sports world. Endorsement opportunities would grow, and future opponents would have to rethink their training camps, knowing that conventional preparation has not worked against his relentless pressure. If Chimaev claims the belt, the division faces a new reality. His rapid ascent would be crowned with gold, and while a 3-division run remains theoretical, holding the middleweight title could allow him to push for a super fight at welterweight given his history at 170. The UFC would likely capitalize on his drawing power, setting up high-profile matchups that could cross divisions. Chimaev's presence as champion might also shift the division's landscape, with fresh contenders prioritized over veterans and the rankings reshuffled to match the new order. The consequences of defeat are different for each fighter. For du Plessis, a loss after conquering Adesanya would raise doubts about his staying power as champion. Chimaev, should he fall short, would see his aura of invincibility dented, a reminder of his brief retirement after COVID complications and how quickly momentum can shift. Neither fighter's career ends here, but perceptions of their ceilings and future opportunities would change. Next steps hinge on the result. A du Plessis win could set up an Adesanya rematch if Izzy earns his way back. If Chimaev prevails, welterweight superfights become possible, while the loser faces a tough climb back, Chimaev potentially dropping into contender limbo, du Plessis needing to rebuild with multiple wins. Let us know your pick in the comments. Will du Plessis' pressure outlast Chimaev's onslaught?